September 1st, 1967. A prison cell in Achach, Bavaria. Guards discover the body of 60-year-old Ilse Koch hanging from a makeshift noose fashioned from bedsheets. After serving 22 years for crimes that shocked the world, the woman once called the bitch of Buchenwald has taken her own life. Her death closes a chapter on one of the most infamous figures of the Nazi concentration camp system, a woman whose sadism, sexual depravity, and casual cruelty became synonymous with the absolute moral bankruptcy of the Third Reich. Before you continue watching, understand this. The story you're about to hear involves documented acts of torture, sexual abuse, and murder on a scale that tests the limits of human comprehension. This channel doesn't sanitize history or look away from uncomfortable truths. Hit that subscribe button because we examine the monsters who shaped World War II, not through sensationalism, but through documented evidence, survivor testimony, and historical record. What made Ilse Koch unique wasn't just her crimes, but the fact that she was a woman wielding absolute power in a system designed for industrial murder. Ilse Koch was born September 22, 1906 in Dresden, Germany, to a working-class family. Her father was a factory foreman, her mother a struggling homemaker. Young Ilse grew up in the rigid social hierarchy of Imperial and Weimar Germany, where class determined destiny and opportunities for women were severely limited. She attended local schools, performed adequately, and seemed destined for factory work or domestic service. Dresden in the 1920s witnessed economic chaos, hyperinflation, and political violence. Young people like Ilse watched their parents' savings evaporate and street battles between communists and fascists become routine. After finishing basic education, Ilse worked at clerical jobs, attractive and ambitious, but frustrated by limited options. The Nazi Party promised belonging, purpose, and restored German greatness. In 1932, she joined, receiving membership number 1,130,836. Through Nazi Party activities, Ilse met Karl Koch in 1934. Koch, born in 1897, was climbing the SS hierarchy rapidly. By the time they met, he held the rank of SS Standartenführer and was positioned for higher command. He was ambitious, ruthless, absolutely devoted to SS ideology, and married. His existing marriage proved no obstacle. He divorced and married Ilse on May 25, 1936. For Ilse, the marriage represented dramatic social elevation from working-class clerk to wife of an SS officer, member of Nazi Germany's elite. In 1936, Karl Koch received appointment as commandant of Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Berlin. Ilse accompanied him, living in the commandant's villa adjacent to the camp. This proximity to systematic brutality began her education in concentration camp operations. She witnessed prisoner abuse, observed punishment rituals, and absorbed the dehumanizing ideology. Contemporary accounts suggest she didn't merely tolerate this environment. She thrived in it. In 1937, Karl Koch received promotion to commandant of Buchenwald concentration camp near Weimar, one of the largest camps in Nazi Germany. Established in July 1937, Buchenwald would eventually imprison over 250,000 people. More than 56,000 would die there from execution, starvation, disease, or medical experimentation. The Kochs arrived in August 1937, moving into the spacious commandant's residence with views over Thuringian countryside, ironically overlooking Weimar, the city of Goethe and Schiller, symbols of German Enlightenment. As commandant's wife, Ilse Koch held no official position. SS regulations technically prohibited wives from involving themselves in camp operations, but regulations meant nothing when your husband commanded the facility. Ilse began inserting herself into camp life. She toured the camp, observed prisoners, attended roll calls. Guards and administrators quickly learned that Frau Koch's preferences mattered. Displeasing her could result in punishment or dismissal. Pleasing her could advance careers. By 1938, Ilse Koch had transformed from commandant's wife into a power unto herself within Buchenwald. She demanded and received her own office in the camp administrative building. She issued orders to guards and capos. She conducted inspections, doled out punishments, and inserted herself into decisions about prisoner treatment. SS officers deferred to her because crossing the commandant's wife was career suicide. Survivors describe Ilse Koch's physical presence as a source of terror. She rode through Buchenwald on horseback, accompanied by vicious German shepherds. Prisoners were required to remove their caps and stand at attention when she passed. Those who failed faced immediate beating or worse. She carried a whip and used it liberally. The sound of hoofbeats became associated with impending violence. Her appearance belied her cruelty. Ilse was conventionally attractive, well-dressed, maintaining careful grooming even in a concentration camp. This contrast between beauty and brutality has earned her nicknames among prisoners: the Bitch of Buchenwald, the Beast of Buchenwald, and Die Hexe, the Witch. These names reflected psychological dissonance prisoners experienced encountering someone who looked like a normal, even attractive woman, behaving with inhuman cruelty. The sexual dimension of Ilse Koch's behavior is extensively documented in survivor testimony. She reportedly selected young, physically fit male prisoners as sexual partners, summoning them to her quarters. These weren't consensual encounters. Prisoners who refused or failed to satisfy her faced execution. Several survivors testified that prisoners selected for these encounters often disappeared shortly afterward, murdered to eliminate witnesses. The most infamous allegation involves human skin. Survivors testified that she collected tattooed skin from murdered prisoners to make lampshades, book covers, and gloves. When Allied forces liberated Buchenwald in April 1945, American investigators found items made from human skin in the Koch residence. Whether Ilse personally ordered prisoners killed for their tattoos or accepted such items as gifts remains debated, but survivor testimony consistently describes her expressing interest in tattooed prisoners who subsequently disappeared. Dr. Eric Wagner, the camp physician, testified that he received orders to preserve skin from deceased prisoners with interesting tattoos from the commandant's office. Though he couldn't definitively confirm whether Karl or Ilse Koch initiated them, prisoners with notable tattoos lived in particular fear of her inspections, knowing that drawing her attention could prove fatal. Beyond the skin collection, Ilse Koch engaged in routine cruelty for trivial offenses. A prisoner who looked at her directly might receive 50 lashes. A prisoner whose uniform wasn't perfectly aligned could be sent to the punishment bunker for days of torture. A prisoner who failed to work quickly enough might be beaten unconscious on her order. Her cruelty was personal, vindictive, motivated by sadistic pleasure rather than camp policy. She particularly targeted Jewish prisoners with vicious abuse. While Buchenwald imprisoned political prisoners, criminals, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, Roma, and others, Jews faced the worst treatment. Ilse Koch's anti-Semitism manifested in deliberate humiliation and violence. She forced Jewish prisoners to perform degrading acts, mocked their religious practices, and singled them out for punishment. Female prisoners at Buchenwald's women's subcamp faced equally brutal treatment. Female survivors described her conducting naked inspections where she ridiculed prisoners' bodies, searching for excuses to order punishments. She reportedly showed special cruelty toward women she deemed attractive, perhaps viewing them as threats. The Koch family's corruption extended beyond sadism into criminal enterprise. Karl and Ilse systematically looted prisoner property, embezzling valuables that should have been sent to SS economic offices. They lived lavishly on stolen wealth, furnishing their villa with expensive items, hosting elaborate parties, maintaining a lifestyle far beyond Karl's official salary. This corruption would eventually contribute to their downfall, as even the SS had limits regarding theft from the organization itself. By 1941, the Kochs had 3 children and maintained the outward appearance of a respectable SS family. Ilse played the role of Nazi ideal woman in public, devoted wife, mother, supporter of the regime. But within Buchenwald's electrified fences, she wielded power with cruel enthusiasm, participating in organized terror and murder. The beginning of the end came not from moral outrage at crimes against prisoners, but from SS internal politics and corruption investigations. In 1941, Prince Josias of Waldeck-Pyrmont began receiving reports about Karl Koch's embezzlement. The Nazi regime operated on twisted morality. Murdering Jews and political enemies was encouraged, but stealing from the SS treasury was criminal. Dr. Georg Konrad Morgan, an SS judge investigating concentration camp corruption, discovered extensive evidence. The Kochs had embezzled hundreds of thousands of Reichsmarks, More damning were unauthorized killings. Karl Koch had ordered numerous prisoners murdered without proper authorization to cover up embezzlement or eliminate witnesses. In August 1943, Karl Koch was arrested and court-martialed for embezzlement, unauthorized killings, and conduct unbecoming an SS officer. Notably, the charges didn't mention crimes against humanity or genocide. The SS prosecuted him for stealing from them and making unauthorized killings that could create legal complications, not for murdering Jews and political prisoners. Ilse Koch was also arrested and interrogated. SS investigators documented her involvement in corruption, affairs with prisoners, sadistic treatment of inmates, and participation in the skin collection. However, as commandant's wife with no official position, she could claim she had no actual authority. The misogynistic SS leadership struggled with the concept of a woman wielding real power, which paradoxically worked in her favor. Karl Koch was found guilty. On April 5, 1945, just days before Buchenwald's liberation, he was executed by firing squad at Buchenwald itself. The SS wanted to eliminate a potentially embarrassing witness before he could fall into enemy hands. Ilse Koch's fate differed. In 1944, she was acquitted by the SS court. The judges determined that while she had behaved improperly, she hadn't committed crimes under SS law. Her cruelty toward prisoners wasn't criminal under Nazi law, as prisoners had no legal rights. The SS court released her with reprimands, but no punishment. This acquittal meant nothing once Germany surrendered. Ilse Koch fled Buchenwald in early 1945 as Allied forces advanced, attempting to disappear using false identity papers. For several months, she successfully evaded capture. American forces liberated Buchenwald on April 11, 1945. What they discovered shocked even battle-hardened soldiers. Emaciated prisoners barely alive, corpses stacked like cordwood, crematoria still containing human remains, medical experiment facilities, punishment cells where prisoners had been tortured to death, and among the evidence, lampshades, book covers, and other items made from human skin. General Dwight D. Eisenhower personally visited Buchenwald days after liberation. Horrified, he ordered extensive documentation through photographs and film. He required local German civilians from Weimar to tour the camp, forcing them to confront atrocities committed in their proximity. American investigators compiled lists of camp personnel to be arrested. Ilse Koch's name appeared prominently in survivor testimony. Prisoners described her in vivid detail: her riding through camp, her selections of tattooed prisoners, her sexual exploitation, her casual brutality. The manhunt intensified. She was captured on June 30th, 1945, in Ludwigsburg, living under a false name and claiming to be a war widow. She was pregnant at the time, carrying her fourth child. Her capture made international headlines. The bitch of Buchenwald would face Allied justice. The first trial of Ilse Koch began on April 11, 1947, exactly 2 years after Buchenwald's liberation. The United States Army convened a military tribunal at Dachau. Koch faced charges of crimes against humanity, including murder, torture, and abuse of prisoners. 30 former Buchenwald prisoners testified against Koch. Andreas Pfaffenberger, an Austrian communist prisoner, testified that Koch ordered the killing of prisoners with interesting tattoos. He personally witnessed her examining prisoners during inspections and marking those with notable body art. These prisoners subsequently disappeared, and their skin later appeared in items found in the Koch residence. Dr. Gustav Wegerer, who had worked in the camp hospital, testified about receiving orders to preserve skin from deceased prisoners. He described the macabre process: carefully removing tattooed skin, treating it with chemicals, stretching it on frames. These preserved skins were delivered to the commandant's office. The prosecution displayed physical evidence that had shocked the world. Lampshades made from human skin, one featuring elaborate tattoos clearly visible on preserved tissue book covers. Gloves, all crafted from murdered prisoners' skin. The items sat on the courtroom table, grotesque testimony to Nazi depravity. Koch's defense argued she held no official position, that any authority was derivative of her husband's command, that she couldn't be held responsible for SS officers following standard procedures. The defense claimed survivor testimony was exaggerated or fabricated, motivated by revenge. They argued the human skin items couldn't be definitively linked to Ilse Koch's personal orders. The defense attempted to portray her as a conventional housewife caught in circumstances beyond her control. This strategy failed spectacularly. The accumulated testimony from dozens of survivors, corroborated by documentary evidence and former SS personnel testimony, demolished any claim of innocence. On August 14, 1947, the tribunal announced its verdict, guilty on all charges. The sentence? Life imprisonment. The judges determined that Ilse Koch had wielded real authority at Buchenwald, that she participated directly in selecting prisoners for murder, that she ordered beatings that resulted in deaths, and that she was complicit in creating items from human skin. However, the story didn't end with conviction. In 1948, General Lucius D. Clay, military governor of the American Zone, reviewed Koch's sentence and commuted it from life imprisonment to 4 years based on time already served. His decision cited insufficient evidence directly linking her to specific murders. The commutation caused immediate international outrage. Survivors were horrified. Jewish organizations protested. International media condemned the decision. Questions arose about whether Clay's decision reflected American reluctance to prosecute lower-level Nazis as Cold War priorities shifted toward rebuilding West Germany as an anti-communist ally. Public outcry forced reconsideration. Survivor groups petitioned for new investigation. The United States Senate held hearings. Under intense pressure, German authorities in the newly formed Federal Republic agreed to prosecute Koch under German law. The Americans transferred her to German custody in 1949. The second trial began on November 27, 1950, in Augsburg, West Germany. Koch faced charges under German criminal law: incitement to murder, incitement to attempted murder, and incitement to bodily harm of prisoners. The prosecution presented largely the same evidence from the first trial, supplemented by additional survivor testimony. Koch maintained her denials. She claimed all survivor testimony was false, motivated by revenge. She stated she never ordered any prisoner killed, never participated in selections, never requested items made from human skin. She portrayed herself as a victim of vindictive prosecution, a German woman being scapegoated for Nazi regime crimes. The German court proved less sympathetic than General Clay. The judges found survivor testimony credible, corroborated, and specific. They rejected arguments that Koch was merely a housewife without authority. The evidence clearly showed she wielded real power, that camp personnel followed her orders, and that prisoners understood she could have them killed on a whim. On January 15, 1951, the Augsburg court convicted Ilse Koch and sentenced her to life imprisonment. This time, no commutation would follow. She was transferred to Outrage prison in Bavaria. She would spend the remaining 16 years of her life behind bars. Ilse Koch entered Outrage prison in 1951 at age 44. She would never taste freedom again. The prison offered none of the power or privilege she had enjoyed at Buchenwald. She was prisoner number 1,251, stripped of identity, authority, and status. Prison records describe Koch as a difficult inmate. She maintained her innocence consistently, claiming she was victim of false testimony and Allied vengeance. She refused to express remorse or acknowledge wrongdoing. This absolute denial reflected either genuine self-deception or calculated strategy to avoid confronting the moral enormity of her actions. Psychologists who evaluated her found her narcissistic, lacking empathy, exhibiting no signs of genuine guilt or shame. Her mental health deteriorated over years of imprisonment. Depression set in, characterized by withdrawal, insomnia, and periodic agitation. The diagnosis suggested major depressive disorder, common among long-term prisoners serving life sentences with no hope of release. Whether her depression stemmed from confinement itself or from suppressed guilt about her crimes remained unclear. International interest in Koch periodically resurged. Journalists requested interviews, which she sometimes granted. She continued denying specific crimes while acknowledging she had been at Buchenwald. She claimed not to remember details about camp operations, that she focused on family duties, that survivor testimony misidentified her. These denials rang hollow given the volume and specificity of testimony against her. Survivor groups monitored her imprisonment closely, fearing potential early release. West German clemency policies in the 1950s were inconsistent. Some war criminals received early release for health, age, or political considerations. Survivor organizations petitioned German authorities to ensure Koch served her full sentence, arguing that releasing her would insult victims' memory and undermine justice. By the mid-1960s, Koch was approaching 60. Her health declined with age and imprisonment stress. She suffered from arthritis, hypertension, and digestive problems. The combination of physical decline and deteriorating mental health created an increasingly concerning clinical picture. In 1967, Koch's behavior became more erratic. Guards noted increased agitation, paranoid statements, and expressions of hopelessness. She told one prison chaplain that she couldn't endure continued imprisonment, that life had become unbearable, that she saw no purpose in continuing. These statements, clear warning signs of suicidal ideation, apparently didn't trigger sufficient intervention. September 1st, 1967. Ilse Koch was found hanging in her cell at Achach prison. She had fashioned a noose from bed sheets, secured it to a fixture, and hanged herself during the night. She was 60 years old. Prison guards discovered her body during morning rounds. Medical personnel confirmed death. The official cause was suicide by hanging. No foul play was suspected. The timing of her suicide after 16 years of imprisonment raised questions. Why then? Had something specific triggered the decision? Or was it the culmination of years of depression and hopelessness? Had she finally confronted the reality of her crimes? Or did she kill herself out of self-pity? Prison officials conducted routine investigation but found no evidence of external factors. Her death appeared to be an individual decision made during profound despair. Reaction to Koch's death varied. Survivor groups expressed that justice had been served, though many noted that her death came too easily compared to the suffering she inflicted. Some survivors stated they would have preferred she lived much longer, continuing to endure imprisonment. Others felt relief that a symbol of Nazi evil had finally been removed from the world. Few expressed sympathy. Media coverage was extensive but brief. Headlines announced "Bitch of Buchenwald found dead," or similar sensational language. Articles recounted her crimes, trial, and imprisonment, most including survivor testimonies about her brutality. The coverage generally treated her death as closure to an ugly chapter of history. Her body was claimed by family members and buried in an unmarked grave. The location has never been publicly disclosed, presumably to prevent the grave becoming a neo-Nazi pilgrimage site. Unlike some Nazi officials whose burial locations are known, Koch's final resting place remains unknown to the public. The question of whether Ilse Koch felt genuine remorse remains unanswered. She never publicly admitted guilt or apologized to victims. Her suicide note, if one existed, was never released publicly. Whether she killed herself from confronting moral reality or from self-pity, we cannot know. What we know is that her death ended a life characterized by cruelty, sadism, and willing participation in genocide. The case of Ilse Koch raises profound questions about female participation in Nazi crimes. The concentration camp system operated primarily through male violence, but women participated at every level. Koch represents the most extreme example, a woman who didn't just enable male violence, but actively participated in systematic cruelty. Understanding female perpetrators challenges assumptions about gender and violence. Society often views women as naturally more empathetic, less violent. Koch's documented sadism contradicts these assumptions. She wasn't coerced or following orders reluctantly. She sought power, wielded it enthusiastically, and inflicted suffering that shocked even male SS officers. Her gender didn't make her less capable of evil. It made her crimes more psychologically disturbing to those who held gendered assumptions about moral capacity. The inconsistency between her two trials reflects broader problems in post-war justice. The first trial resulted in life imprisonment, commuted to time served. The second trial resulted in life imprisonment that she actually served. This inconsistency wasn't based on different evidence, but different political contexts. The first commutation reflected American prioritization of Cold War alliance with West Germany. The second conviction reflected German attempts to demonstrate commitment to justice amid international criticism. The human skin items remain among the most disturbing Holocaust artifacts. The lampshades displayed at trials became iconic symbols of Nazi depravity. However, historical debate continues about the extent of human skin use at Buchenwald and specifically about Ilse Koch's role. Some historians argue evidence directly linking her to ordering prisoners killed for their skin is ambiguous. Others point to survivor testimony as clear and consistent. This debate doesn't excuse her documented crimes but reflects importance of historical precision even regarding proven perpetrators. The broader lesson from Ilse Koch's life involves the ordinariness of perpetrators. She wasn't born evil. She wasn't obviously psychopathic before joining the Nazi movement. She was an ordinary working-class woman from Dresden who made choices at key moments. Joining the Nazi Party, marrying an SS officer, embracing power at Buchenwald, participating in brutality. These choices, made incrementally in specific historical contexts, transformed her into someone capable of unthinkable cruelty. This ordinariness matters for genocide prevention. If perpetrators were obviously monstrous from birth, identifying and stopping them would be straightforward. The reality is that ordinary people commit extraordinary evil under certain conditions. Authoritarian ideology, dehumanizing propaganda, opportunity for power without accountability, social pressure, and gradual moral compromise. Understanding how ordinary people become perpetrators remains essential for preventing future atrocities. Ilse Koch died by her own hand on September 1, 1967, in Eichach prison, Bavaria. She had spent 22 years in prison for crimes that included incitement to murder, torture, and systematic abuse of concentration camp prisoners. Her death closed a chapter on one of the most notorious figures of the Nazi camp system. The number of prisoners who suffered directly from her cruelty cannot be precisely calculated. Dozens testified about specific incidents. Hundreds more likely experienced her brutality but didn't survive. Thousands lived in terror during her years at Buchenwald, knowing that attracting her attention could mean death. Justice for Ilse Koch came late and incompletely. Her first trial resulted in a sentence commuted almost immediately. Only international outrage forced her retrial and genuine punishment. Many of her subordinates, guards who carried out her orders and participated in atrocities, never faced prosecution. They blended into post-war German society, their crimes forgotten or ignored. If you found this documented history valuable, this channel examines World War II perpetrators, victims, and the complex processes of justice and memory. We don't sensationalize or sanitize. We present evidence, testimony, and analysis. Subscribe, share this video with others interested in historical truth, and comment below. What aspect of Nazi crimes and punishment should we examine next? We read every suggestion. The death of Ilse Koch removed from the world a woman who symbolized the depths to which human beings can sink when ideology, power, and cruelty combine. Her victims received only partial justice. The families destroyed at Buchenwald never recovered. The children murdered, the prisoners tortured, the lives destroyed cannot be restored by trials or imprisonment or suicide. Remember that understanding perpetrators isn't about excusing them. It's about recognizing that genocide doesn't happen through supernatural evil, but through human choices. Ilse Koch chose to join the Nazi Party. She chose to embrace power at Buchenwald. She chose to participate in brutality. At every step, she could have chosen differently. She didn't. Thousands of prisoners paid with their lives for her choices. The documented evidence is clear. The survivor testimonies are consistent. The physical evidence exists. Ilse Koch was guilty of crimes against humanity, and her conviction and imprisonment represent justice served. Her death by suicide ended a life characterized by cruelty, but couldn't undo the suffering she caused. History remembers her not as the powerful figure she imagined herself, but as a cautionary example of how ordinary people become monsters when given power without accountability in systems designed for murder. The prisoners of Buchenwald deserve the final word. Their testimonies preserve truth that Koch and others tried to hide. Their courage in surviving and bearing witness ensured that history would record what happened. Their voices, speaking across decades, remind us that behind statistics and historical abstractions were real people who suffered and died. We honor them not by sensationalizing their suffering, but by remembering accurately, teaching honestly, and remaining vigilant against ideologies that dehumanize others.